Videos like these are made possible by viewers like you, who support the channel through Patreon, channel memberships, and stream donations. And don't forget to check out the Bad Weapon Rehabilitation servers at www.badweaponrehab.tf. Check the links in the description for more information, and let's get into the video. The Flying Guillotine. This was a difficult one to tackle. Not because I have mixed feelings on the weapon, or even because of my inability to pronounce French for once, but because I wasn't sure about what approach to take in terms of discussing it. I started a poll asking which of two weapons deserved a video in the In Defense Of series. Mostly because, in the interest of complete transparency, finances have been kind of rough recently, which is why you'll be seeing this thing in the corner of the whole video, and that series tends to consistently get good views. And while most people voted for the Guillotine in that poll, I think that's honestly just because a lot of people like that weapon better, and so they wanted to see a video on it in general. A lot of the comments seem to indicate that an In Defense Of simply wasn't necessary for it, and after giving it some thought, I'm not entirely sure if I agree, but I also don't think that approaching the Cleaver from a purely defensive standpoint is the most interesting or the most correct way to talk about it. The main thing I would want to contend in an In Defense Of is the idea that the Cleaver is some sort of undertuned or even straight up bad weapon because of the removal of the Sandman Cleaver combo, which is a frankly ridiculous notion. But there's two sides to this coin. And while some disparage the Cleaver because you can't get an easy 150 damage on enemies incapable of fighting back, even in its current state, it can also be easily seen as a very powerful weapon. Arguably too powerful in some cases. Well, Curious Case is kind of a series at this point, so let's go with that. It seems to fit with this particular conundrum of weapon balancing. With the Cleaver being a secondary weapon, that means you're trading a pistol for it. And the pistol is an extremely reliable source of both mid-range and general backup damage as a scout. But unlike Scout's other cooldown-based secondaries, this one is still capable of dealing damage. In fact, aside from crit Rap Assassin balls with the right damage spread, this is going to be your best means of dealing long-range damage as the Scout, something he's ordinarily inept in. 50 damage is a pretty solid amount, and tack on the extra 40 damage you'll take from bleed, assuming there's no source of health nearby, and this is one of the best tools that Scout has for initiating a fight before he's in the proper range for it. This is incredibly useful for so many reasons. Most classes will now either be brought down to the Scout's level in terms of their health, or they'll just be left easier to kill once he does close the gap. This is also especially useful for targets that are naturally going to be far outside of your range, like enemy snipers. And thanks to the arc of the projectile, you can even spam cleavers down certain sightlines while the sniper can't see you at all. On top of dealing a massive chunk of damage to the sniper, the bleed will also stagger their aim for several seconds, and depending on their health, force a retreat altogether. And even for enemies who manage to retreat out of the Scout's range, this can still work as a fantastic finisher where you might normally be praying for good bullet spread to whittle someone down at range. And hell, it even works as a great fallback tool for when you're the one who has to retreat, especially since the bleed will keep dealing damage to them even long after you've left their line of sight. So the Cleaver is easily one of Scout's best long-range damage options. I think even the people who think that the Cleaver was only good for the Sandman combos can say that much without issue. But what about at close range? Does it fall off in usefulness there? Maybe compared to the pistol, assuming the most ideal circumstances, but honestly not all that much. Obviously, if every pistol shot in a clip hits, then it's going to blow the Cleaver out of the water even considering the bleed, but that's rarely going to happen due to bullet spread and fall off at ranges, making the damage more inconsistent the further away you get. So trading potential damage for a consistent chunk isn't always going to be a bad thing. I don't think the damage is necessarily the issue in terms of close range encounters. 50 damage plus DOT is a pretty good chunk. It's just that it's really not suited for longer fights the way the pistol is, since it's going to be on a cooldown after you use it. And being a single projectile, it's a lot more all or nothing than the more disposable pistol shots. As quickly as the Cleaver recharges, throwing out a couple of pistol bullets will always be faster, but I think that's a fair trade-off for chunky long-range burst damage. But I guess that's where we come over to that other side of the coin. Does Scout really need a source of long-range damage? I mean, one of Scout's core traits is his absurd strength at close range and his ability to easily close gaps. A genuine case can be made that giving him a long-range spam tool on top of that is just overkill. We certainly don't shy away from pointing out how bullshit it is that Sniper has a very easy to use combo that nullifies his close range weakness. Hell, I don't shy away from saying that's bullshit, and I'm one of the people who actually defends Sniper. And that bullshit's on a way longer cooldown than the Cleaver. Well, in a casual setting certainly, I'm not really sure if the Cleaver's range is much of an issue. In a lot of game modes and situations, there may not be much that a scout can do at all without putting himself in a basically suicidal position. Flanking an enemy sniper will almost certainly get him killed, but depending on the position and the map, the same can easily happen to you. And enemies within the radius of a sentry gun are generally speaking pretty safe from scouts. It can encourage a somewhat passive playstyle of chucking cleavers and throwing in some chip damage while waiting for the moment to make a play, but the trade-off is that you get to play scout when the game is currently being locked down by a solid hold until you get that opportunity to make a play. And really, if range is a concern, then the Rap Assassin exists, and no one but European competitive players is going to complain about that. But that's also a fair issue to bring up. Considering Scout's laundry list of ridiculously powerful secondary weapons, is it reasonable to sacrifice your options to put the Cleaver in that slot when there's a melee weapon, a far more disposable weapon slot for Scout especially, that basically does the same thing? Well, I think the Cleaver has its advantages over the Rap Assassin. For one thing, the damage is always consistent, while the Rap Assassin's damage is based on the random damage of the explosion, plus whether or not you were far enough away to land a guaranteed crit. And unless you get that crit, plus more than the minimum bobble explosion damage, the Rap Assassin's projectile will always be weaker than the Cleaver's. Now of course the Rap Assassin can also deal random crits, which is a fair point to bring up. But again, those only put it on about the same level as a basic Cleaver. Not to mention, even after fixing the stupid bullshit where the bubble would randomly explode on certain parts of certain maps, it will still collide with your teammates and shatter before it can deal damage if they get in the way, while the Cleaver doesn't end up having this problem. Combine this with the fact that the Cleaver has a much shorter cooldown that you can make even shorter by hitting those same long-range shots that will get you the same damage with the Rap Assassin, and I think it's fair to say that these weapons don't overlap to quite the same degree. This obviously isn't to disparage the Rap Assassin. I mean, I made a whole video talking about how it's my go-to scout melee, and it's definitely a much safer pick than the Cleaver since the melee slot is a lot more disposable on scout, but even then, there's nothing to say you can't run them together, especially since bleed effects from different weapons stack. Of course, at that point, you're putting all of your faith in your scattergun aim, which for some people may not be the most effective. But hey, pair it with the shortstop, and you can be a mid to long range menace who peppers down anyone in a line of sight. Crits are also something to talk about while we're on the subject of the Rap Assassin. The Cleaver was most commonly used in combination with the Sandman since it would always crit enemies under some kind of stun effect. And this was the easiest way of ensuring you would get a stun outside of babysitting a Natasha Heavy. Now, subjectively, I kind of miss being able to get crits with this thing. Was it terrible? Absolutely. Was it awful game balance? Unquestionably. But god damn it, the ragdolls were just so good. They just fucking zip across half the map, yeeted by the sheer force of Cleaver in the face. God, it was comedy gold. I mean, if you get lucky, you'll get a crits medic on you, and it's always satisfying to get a post-round humiliation kill with it, but outside of getting some extremely choice crit pumpkins during Halloween, the glory days of crit cleavers are over. You can get mini crits with the Fan of War, but that's a nicotine patch to the addiction that is funny Cleaver ragdolls. Obviously, balance-wise, this is so much better, but there's something to be said about what was lost along the way. A very small, extremely selfish part of me would want to see guaranteed crits somehow come back, but there would need to be some other pretty massive changes, especially considering how spammable the Cleaver is. Which brings me to the next topic. The recharge rate is fucking insane. 5 seconds may seem like an eternity in the middle of a heated firefight, but in the grand scheme of things, holy shit, you could just chuck these things out over and over and over again. Especially if you hit targets from long range, since that knocks it down to an even shorter 3.5 second recharge time. That is the single shortest cooldown in the entire game, unless you count getting a Tide Turner kill with anything else that gives you recharge back on kill, because, you know, that's literally instantaneous. In fact, balance-wise, I think this is one of the more powerful aspects of the Guillotine that, if it were buffed in some other way, would be the first thing on the chopping block. Oh wait, that's a pun, isn't it? The Cleaver is already pretty strong as is. If it were to get some kind of guaranteed crit effect for the sake of those glorious ragdolls, or hell, even just a slight damage buff, then yeah, you'd pretty much have to bring the cooldown onto the level of most other weapons. So the question now is, for how useful the Guillotine is, and how it dramatically increases Scout's effective range when he's already one of the strongest classes in the game, does it deserve to recharge so damn fast? Well, again, in casual, I have basically no issues with this. With 12 people to shoot at, having a Cleaver at the ready every few seconds feels about right. You don't feel like you're getting too many, but you also feel like you're really giving up something in those few seconds you're left with at a secondary in a firefight. I think it works out. I think if I were to come to any kind of balancing conclusion when it comes to the Cleaver, it would be this. The Cleaver is a weapon that I think is absolutely fine in casual play. It's not underpowered, it's by no means useless just because the Sandman combo is gone, and it's not too strong either. Especially since even though it can hit those enemies who are behind the lines of a sentry from a position of relative safety, its competition is a lot better at combating the sentry directly and taking out the problem by the roots. But it's in competitive play where basically all of the problems come in. And I kind of see this as being a weapon design that's on the whole just not super compatible with competitive, same as the base jumper. It's one of those designs where I'm just not sure if the core design could fit into a competitive environment without massive overhauls that basically change it into a completely different weapon, or massive nerfs that put it on the same tier as its former combo counterpart. The high single target damage matters a lot more when there's less people on the enemy team. The spammable nature matters a lot more when Scout is in an environment that already enables him to be at his most powerful, and the downsides don't matter nearly as much in the setting with fewer engineers, meaning no sentries to pistol down, and where fights are generally a lot shorter and more team-centric, so you don't exactly get a chance to want for your secondary mid-fight. All this to say that I think the ban in competitive is justified for the format, and I don't doubt that there's a potential version of the Cleaver somewhere in the vast multiverse that is both fun to use and casual, and fitting in a competitive setting, but frankly I don't trust Valve to make that weapon a reality any more than I trust them to do anything about bots without being pressured into it by external forces. Again, not only am I fine with the Cleaver where it is now, but I want to say this is probably my favorite Scout secondary to use. It's just plain fun. Hitting long range shots is satisfying, the ragdolls are still pretty amusing even without the crits, and I just love using it to initiate a fight before I go in and beef all my scattergun shots. And when I do beef all my shots, there's the bleed to finish him off anyway. I think it's a fantastic weapon, and a versatile one too. It fits with damn near any loadout. Use it as a softener and finisher with the scattergun? Go for it. Cleave someone in twain after knocking them in the air with the force of nature? Sounds rad, man. And come on, you know that any weapon that makes a babyface even remotely usable is gonna be pretty awesome. So in basically 99% of situations, the Cleaver is a pretty awesome weapon. And in competitive, I mean, it's banned, so it's not causing any problems there, I guess. So yeah, keep on keeping on, little Cleaver. Just make sure that even if I'm not getting any crits with you, I keep getting those nutty long-range shots, and I won't trade you out for the pistol. Wait a second, I just remembered. Capture the Flag has crits on Cap. You fool! Oh, we're so back, Cleaver Bros. Oh, we're so back. Come on! Bat cap of the century, baby.